Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So it wasn't so long ago on the channel that I talked about my top 10 horror films of 2020, and now we're already moving on to talk about my top 10 horror films of 2019. And that's largely because when I did my top 10 horror films of 2020 video that I pretty much had this list ready to go. And I have to say I think 2019 was a really strong year for horror. I think if you compare the top 5 horror films from this year to 2020, it would be a landslide victory to 2019. I think that's the standard of horror we're talking about when it comes to 2019. So I'm going to do the video in the usual way. I'll count down from my number 10 right down to my number 1, my favourite choice. And as always, I'd like to stress that this is entirely subjective, but do drop your own lists, your top 10 horror films from 2019 in the comments, or maybe just the top 5, because I enjoy discovering films that I haven't yet discovered and, finding new favourites maybe from that particular year. So do put your own choices in the comment section. Anyway, let's start here with my number 10, which is Happy Death Day to You, the second Happy Death Day film, of course, directed by Christopher Landon and starring Jessica Rothe as Tree Gelbman. Now, whilst this is pretty much a rinse and repeat of the first film, I just think it does that whole concept very well. The Groundhog Day formula of someone having to live the same day, or the same death day as it were, over and over again. And I just think this one amps up the comedy aspects. I mean, it's not even so much of a horror film, this one. I think it does, less of the slasher horror thing that the first film did. But I think it's still a pretty good film, and I have to stress that the reason this film has made it to my number 10 has nothing to do with the fact I have a bit of a celebrity crush on Jessica Rothe, the lead in this film. Honestly, it's got nothing to do with that at all. Anyway, let's move on quickly to my number 9 choice, which is Escape Room, directed by Adam Robitel. And, this falls within, I like a lot of horror like this, which is game-based, puzzle-based, survival, sort of, having to survive traps and negotiate difficult scenarios. It's very much up my street when it comes to horror. I love the Saw films. I love Cube from 1997. So Escape Room kind of falls within that sort of realm of horror. And this is less bloody and less violent than the Saw films, obviously, but I think what it does well. Some good characters here. I love the room designs in this film as well, and even though I slightly prefer the second film, perhaps unusually within the Escape Room fan base, I still have respect for this first film. I still think it's a pretty good film with some good performances, and what it does, once again, it does pretty well. So that's Escape Room coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8 here we have a film from the Conjuring universe, Annabelle Comes Home, and another Annabelle film here, which I actually do enjoy. I think it was ranked quite low down when I did my Conjuring universe film ranking, but I still really like this film. I think McKenna Grace is very good. I also think Katie Sackhoff, I think her name is very, very good as Daniela. And, it does suspense building well. It perhaps overdoes the suspense a bit for me sometimes, which is maybe why I didn't rank it so high in my Conjuring universe ranking. But I do think it's a good film. I think the standard of the Conjuring films is generally pretty high as well. I do think that. I think that this is a solid entry in that franchise. And like I say, I think, I have to say McKenna Grace, she's like the spitting image of Kiernan Shipka. They could almost be twins. They look so alike, it's kind of bizarre. But yeah, I do really like her performance in this film, as I say, and I think that overall the film is nicely done, and it does have a good climax as well towards the end for me. Coming in at number 7 is an Indonesian horror mystery film called Impetigore. This one was directed by Joko Anwar, and is a film which I think is very focused on its story elements and the folklore aspects of this. It's basically 2 girls visiting a remote village where one has a connection, a family connection, and is interested in trying to use that connection to sell a house there, I think. But, they discover this village has a lot of weird stuff going on. There's weird stuff going on with babies, with skinning, with some suspicious characters that live there, and, things develop pretty rapidly, although actually it's a fairly slow-paced film, but I think, the madness amps up more and more as the film goes on. I think it's a really good and interesting film from that year. If you like mystery in horror, I think you'll enjoy this one more than if you don't. But yeah, really interesting international film from that particular year in 2019. Now, coming out at number 6 is a divisive choice, I think. One of my more divisive choices, perhaps. This is a film directed by John Alianetti called The Silence, which came out on Netflix, I think, in 2019. And a lot of people dislike this film. I noticed very low ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. It also has low rating on IMDb as well. And I think that's largely because people think it's a rip-off of A Quiet Place. But actually, this film was in development before A Quiet Place. And I still think in its own right, it's actually a very good horror film. Sure, it's nothing anything necessarily phenomenal, but I think what it does well, and I enjoy the characters in the film. I think Kiernan Shipka's good. It also has Miranda Otto in this film as well, interestingly, you might know from Lord of the Rings. And I like the developments that are done sort of enough to keep the tension building. I like the Vesps idea as well. I think the Vesps are really cool in this movie. And yeah, I actually think this is good. I'm not on the same, maybe on the same page as most people with The Silence, but I think The Silence deserves a bit more credit than it gets. So anyway, it's coming in here at number 6 in my top 10 horror films of 2019. Coming in next at number 5 is a popular choice for that year, I think. That's Ready or Not, directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. Two names you probably hear quite often when it comes to modern horror. They did direct the new Scream films, and they're names that often come up, particularly in comedy horror as well. And Ready or Not is my pick here at number 5, starring Samara Weaving as Grace. And she is a bride-to-be in this film, and she's marrying into a weird family tradition. And she ends up having to play this hide-and-seek game with a very deadly, deadly element to it. And there's lots of blood, there's lots of twists, there's, all sorts of great comical stuff that goes down in this film. It's very violent, very bloody, as I say, but a great choice, I think, for that particular year. And I'm not surprised why so many people love Ready or Not. It's a great horror comedy from 2019. Coming in here at number 5. Now, coming in at number 4, we've got a film called Brightburn, which was directed by David Yarovesky, also coming out that year, that I think is a sort of the Superman idea, but it's flipping it on its head. It's like, what would Superman do as a kid if he abused his powers? So if you've not seen Brightburn before, that's the main idea of this film. What I really like about the film, though, is it just doesn't just focus on that. It also uses the parent-child relationship to great effect, with a really strong performance from Elizabeth Banks in this film as well. And I have to say, I think the kids, the actor that plays the kids, he reminds me of maybe what makes me think of what Tobin Bell would look like if he was very young, John Kramer from the Saw films. It's actually an eerie resemblance. It's kind of like he's got that creepy look to him, but he fits that particular role of Brightburn in this film very, very well, I think. And it's a pretty fascinating film. I think some great kills, great developments. Overall, I just think this is a really strong film. Again, maybe a little underrated from 2019 is Brightburn. And really good, I think, really good horror film from that year for me. Now, coming in next at number 3, we've got Alexandre Ajo's Crawl, starring Kayla Scodelario. And I think this is a great creature feature. I think it's exciting. It's not too deep a film. Let's be honest, most creature features aren't too deep. Essentially you have this hurricane incident in Florida, and there's floods everywhere and alligators on the loose. And the alligators are very much the star of the show. You have this kind of swimming sort of sub-story with Kayla Scodelario's character. And that's kind of, I feel like that's maybe a little far-fetched at times in this movie, but the father-daughter thing's also kind of endearing. And I love the general sort of excitement this film introduced, particularly with the alligator scenes. I think they are the best parts of the movie. But yeah, I've repeat watched this one a lot, and I think that always counts for something. If you revisit films, rather like with albums, if you revisit them a lot, like I have done with Crawl, then it's usually a sign you really love that film. That's why Crawl is so high up at number 3 for me on my list. Now we're down to the top 2 on this list, and coming in at number 2 is an absolute epic from 2019, directed by Ari Aster. And I prefer this film, Midsommar. I like this more than Hereditary. I think over time I've come to like it more than Hereditary as well. I think this is a fantastic summer-based film with this weird cult. But whilst the cults are sort of, the sort of real horror aspect of this film and their sort of weird traditions and rituals, I think that the main characters also have a big part to play, and no doubt in part due to the stellar turn of Florence Pugh here. I also think Jack Reynor deserves a big shout out, although Florence is incredible. He's also fantastic as the boyfriend in this film. This film has pretty much everything. I mean, it's very long, but I think it justifies most of its runtime for me. The developments with the cult are really good, as are the sort of, as you see our main characters being seduced by them in a really interesting way too. I think the kills are pretty terrifying in this film. Everything is happening in broad daylight, which is an odd sort of setup for a horror film, but they make it work. And this Ari Aster film, I think, is one where the hype is absolutely justified. I really enjoy Midsummer from 2019. That's why it's my number 2. Not quite my number 1, which is a Spanish film from that year, directed by a director's name I'm going to have to read to try and pronounce correctly, which is Galder Castelu Arusha, I think. And this is a great, unique concept horror film, sort of sci-fi dystopian concept from 2019 called The Platform. So here's the idea. You have this platform that descends through different levels with, I think, usually about 2 people on each level. And there is, you know, at the top level, the platform starts with lots and lots of food on the plate and lots of drink. As it gets lower down, obviously, more is eaten off that platform, off that table. And eventually, as it gets lower down, the people on the lower levels don't get much food, if any food at all. And it raises questions, it raises social commentary, I think, on class and privilege, and that those at the bottom aren't getting nearly as much as those at the top. And I think it's an amazing idea, this concept. I love it. It does remind me, in a way, of a sort of slightly minimalist, but really ramping up sort of the horror elements very well in this movie. I think the old man is just absolutely terrifying in this film. He's brilliant. You know, that for me makes the first half in particular of this film really enticing. I think it's just a film that I think deserves a lot of love. It's a really strong Spanish horror film from that year that you must check out if you enjoy this kind of survival, interesting sci-fi dystopian concept of a horror movie like I do. Maybe if you like Cube from '97, I think I can see you enjoying this one. So yeah, do check this out. The Platform is my number 1 horror film of 2019. It has even beaten Midsummer just because I think it offers something really unique and really interesting. And that's it from me for this latest top 10 list for horror films from a particular year. Hope you enjoyed the list. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you like and subscribe if you enjoy these kind of videos. Otherwise, from me, as always, until next time, it's bye for now.